The hidden camera was so small I almost missed it. Tucked behind the decorative ceramic owl on the bedroom dresser, its tiny lens pointed directly at the bed where I had been sleeping for 3 nights, completely unaware that every moment of my privacy was being recorded and transmitted to unknown viewers who had been watching me undress, sleep, and go about my most intimate personal routines. I discovered the camera only by accident when I knocked over the owl while reaching for my phone charger, and the ceramic figure split open to reveal the sophisticated surveillance equipment that had been disguised as innocent bedroom decor. The realization that I had been under constant surveillance in what I thought was a private, secure vacation rental filled me with a violation and terror that went beyond anything I had ever experienced, knowing that strangers had been watching my most vulnerable moments and that recordings of my privacy might be circulating on the internet or being used for purposes I couldn't even imagine. My name is Sarah, and that discovery taught me that Airbnb properties are not just homes away from home. They're stages where strangers can watch your most private moments, and some hosts view their guests not as customers to serve, but as entertainment to exploit and victims to control. Ever wondered why some Airbnb hosts seem too eager to help with your personal belongings? Ever questioned why certain properties have an unusual number of decorative items positioned at strange angles? Comment below if you've stayed in vacation rentals and felt like you were being watched, because tonight I'm sharing 3 true accounts that will make you examine every ceramic owl, every picture frame, and every mirror in every Airbnb you've ever trusted. These aren't isolated incidents or exaggerated stories designed to scare people away from vacation rentals. These are real experiences from real travelers who learned that when you stay in someone else's home, you're placing your trust in people whose backgrounds, intentions, and mental stability are completely unknown to you. Michael was a software engineer in his early 30s who booked a highly rated Airbnb apartment in downtown Portland, Oregon, for a week-long business trip that required him to attend meetings and conferences throughout the city. Michael had chosen the apartment based on its excellent reviews, convenient location, and professional photographs that showed a clean, modern space that would provide comfortable accommodations for his extended business stay. The host, who identified himself as David, had a 5-star rating and dozens of positive reviews from previous guests who praised his responsiveness, cleanliness, and attention to guest comfort and satisfaction. The apartment was located in a trendy neighborhood known for its restaurants, coffee shops, and proximity to the business district where Michael would be attending his meetings. The listing described a 1-bedroom apartment with modern amenities, high-speed internet, and all the conveniences that business travelers needed for productive and comfortable stays. Michael had communicated with David through the Airbnb platform before his arrival, and the host had been helpful and professional in providing check-in instructions and local recommendations. Michael's arrival at the apartment proceeded smoothly, with David providing detailed instructions for accessing the building, and the apartment unit using a lockbox system that allowed guests to check in independently without requiring the host to be present. The apartment matched the photographs and descriptions from the listing, with clean, modern furnishings and amenities that met Michael's expectations. For the first 3 days of his stay, Michael's experience at the apartment was entirely positive, with no problems or concerns about the accommodations, the neighborhood, or his interactions with the host. Michael established a routine of leaving early for his business meetings and returning to the apartment in the evening to work on his laptop and prepare for the next day's activities. But on the 4th night of his stay, Michael began to notice subtle signs that someone had been entering the apartment while he was away during the day, despite the fact that he had been locking the door and had not given anyone permission to access the unit during his absence. Michael noticed that items in the apartment had been moved slightly from their positions, that his personal belongings had been rearranged in ways that he didn't remember organizing them, and that there were signs of recent activity in areas of the apartment that he hadn't used. Michael's initial assumption was that the host might be entering the apartment for routine maintenance or cleaning services that hadn't been mentioned in the listing or their previous communications. Michael contacted David through the Airbnb messaging system to to inquire about any scheduled maintenance or services that might require access to the apartment during his stay. But David denied any knowledge of maintenance activities and insisted that no one had been given access to the apartment. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you've ever returned to your Airbnb to find your belongings mysteriously rearranged, because what Michael discovered about his laptop proved that some hosts view business travelers not as guests to accommodate, but as sources of valuable information to steal and exploit. Michael's concern about unauthorized access to the apartment escalated when he discovered that his laptop computer had been accessed and that files had been copied to external storage devices while he was away from the apartment. Michael's laptop contained sensitive business information, client data, and personal files that could be valuable for corporate espionage, identity theft, or other criminal purposes. Michael's investigation of the unauthorized computer access revealed that sophisticated software had been installed on his laptop that allowed remote monitoring of his activities, access to his files, and recording of his passwords and personal information. The software was professionally installed and nearly impossible to detect without specialized knowledge and security tools, suggesting that whoever had accessed his computer had significant technical expertise and criminal intentions. Michael realized that his choice of Airbnb accommodation had exposed him to a sophisticated criminal operation that was using vacation rental properties to gain access to guests' personal information, business data, and financial resources. The host's excellent reviews and professional presentation had been part of an elaborate deception designed to attract business travelers and other guests who would be carrying valuable information and resources. Michael's attempts to document the unauthorized access and report the criminal activity to law enforcement were complicated by the fact that the evidence was primarily digital and that the criminals had used sophisticated techniques to cover their tracks and avoid detection. Michael's laptop forensics revealed the extent of the data theft, but identifying the perpetrators and recovering the stolen information required extensive investigation by cybersecurity experts. The investigation revealed that the Airbnb host was part of a criminal network that specialized in targeting business travelers and other guests who were likely to be carrying valuable information and resources. The criminals used legitimate-appearing vacation rental listings to attract victims, and they had developed methods for accessing guests' rooms and devices without leaving obvious evidence of their criminal activities. Michael's experience taught him that Airbnb accommodations could expose guests to sophisticated criminal operations that were specifically designed to exploit the trust and vulnerability of travelers who were staying in unfamiliar locations with limited security and protection. But if you think sophisticated cybercrime represents the most disturbing threat that Airbnb guests can face, wait until you hear what happened to Jennifer in rural Vermont. Because sometimes the danger doesn't come from hidden criminal networks or professional thieves. It comes from hosts whose mental instability and obsessive behavior turn your peaceful retreat into a nightmare of surveillance control and psychological manipulation that makes escape seem impossible. Jennifer was a graduate student in her mid-20s who booked an Airbnb house in rural Vermont for a solo writing retreat, seeking a quiet, isolated location where she could focus on completing her master's thesis without the distractions and interruptions of her normal academic and social environment. Jennifer had chosen the property based on its remote location, peaceful setting, and the host's description of a writer-friendly environment with comfortable workspace. The house was located on a large rural property surrounded by woods and farmland, with no immediate neighbors and limited access that would provide the solitude and quiet that Jennifer needed for her writing project. The listing described a fully furnished house with modern amenities, reliable internet, and a dedicated office space that would allow Jennifer to establish a productive work routine during her planned 2-week stay. The host, who identified herself as Margaret, had positive reviews from previous guests who had used the property for similar retreats and creative projects. Margaret had been responsive and helpful during Jennifer's booking process, providing detailed information about the property and the local area, and expressing enthusiasm for hosting a graduate student who would appreciate the peaceful environment. Jennifer's arrival at the house proceeded according to plan, with Margaret providing clear directions to the remote property and meeting Jennifer in person to provide a tour of the house and explain the amenities and local resources that would be available during her stay. Margaret appeared to be a friendly, eccentric woman in her 60s, who lived alone on the large rural property and occasionally rented the guest house to visitors. For the first week of her stay, Jennifer's experience at the house was productive and peaceful, with the quiet environment and comfortable workspace allowing her to make significant progress on her thesis writing. Jennifer established a routine of working during the day and taking evening walks on the property as trails to clear her mind and enjoy the natural surroundings. But during the second week of her stay, Jennifer began to notice that Margaret's behavior was becoming increasingly intrusive and inappropriate, with the host making frequent unannounced visits to the guest house and showing excessive interest in Jennifer's personal life, academic work, and daily activities. Margaret would enter the guest house without permission, claiming to be checking on maintenance issues or providing additional services, but her visits seemed designed to monitor Jennifer's activities. Margaret's intrusions escalated when she began making comments about Jennifer's appearance, clothing, and personal relationships that suggested she had been observing Jennifer's private activities and communications without permission. Margaret would reference details about Jennifer's phone conversations, her personal correspondence, and her daily routines that she could only have known through unauthorized surveillance. Hit that like button if you've ever had an Airbnb host who seemed to know too much about your private conversations and personal activities. Because what Jennifer discovered about Margaret's obsession proved that some hosts view isolated guests not as customers to serve, but as captive audiences for their need to control and monitor other people's lives. Jennifer's attempts to establish boundaries and request privacy were met with hostility and manipulation from Margaret, who would become defensive and accusatory when Jennifer asked her to respect the guest house's privacy and limit her visits to necessary maintenance or emergency situations. Margaret's behavior suggested that she viewed Jennifer not as a paying guest, but as a captive audience for her attention and control. The situation became more disturbing when Jennifer discovered that Margaret had been entering the guest house during her absence and going through her personal belongings, reading her academic work, and examining her private correspondence and personal items. Jennifer found evidence that Margaret had been photographing her thesis materials and personal documents, and that she had been copying information from Jennifer's laptop and personal files. Jennifer realized that Margaret's interest in hosting guests was not motivated by financial need or hospitality, but by a desire to control and monitor people who were isolated and vulnerable in the remote location where help was far away and escape was difficult. Margaret's behavior suggested serious mental health issues and potentially dangerous obsessions with her guests. Jennifer's attempts to leave the property early and terminate her stay were complicated by Margaret's increasingly erratic and threatening behavior, with the host becoming agitated and possessive when Jennifer announced her intention to check out before the end of her planned stay. Margaret insisted that Jennifer had no right to leave early and that she was obligated to remain on the property for the full duration of her booking. Jennifer's escape from the property required her to wait until Margaret was away from the house and then quickly pack her belongings and leave without confronting the host or providing advance notice of her departure. Jennifer was concerned that Margaret might try to prevent her from leaving or might become violent if she felt that her control over Jennifer was being threatened. The investigation that followed Jennifer's report to local law enforcement revealed that Margaret had a history of inappropriate behavior with previous guests, and that several other visitors had reported similar experiences with unauthorized surveillance invasion of privacy and inappropriate personal attention from the host. The investigation also revealed that Margaret had been using information gathered from guests' personal belongings and communications for stalking and harassment activities. Jennifer's experience taught her that remote Airbnb properties could expose guests to hosts with serious mental health issues and criminal intentions, and that the isolation that made such properties attractive for retreats and getaways could also make guests vulnerable to hosts who viewed their temporary captive audience as opportunities for control and exploitation. But even obsessive hosts with stalking behavior seem almost manageable compared to what happened to David and Lisa in Savannah. Because sometimes the most terrifying Airbnb experiences don't involve living hosts at all. They involve properties where previous residents never really left, and where your romantic getaway becomes a supernatural encounter with entities who view your presence as an intrusion into their eternal residence. David and Lisa were a married couple in their early 40s who booked an Airbnb house in Savannah, Georgia for a romantic anniversary weekend, choosing a historic property in the city's famous historic district that promised charm, elegance, and the kind of atmospheric setting that would make their celebration memorable and special. The couple had researched Savannah's historic accommodations extensively and had chosen the Airbnb property based on its beautiful photographs, excellent reviews, and the host's detailed descriptions of the house's historical significance. The house was a restored 19th century mansion that had been converted into a luxury vacation rental, with period antiques, elegant decor, and modern amenities that promised to combine historical charm with contemporary comfort. The listing emphasized the property's romantic atmosphere and its suitability for special occasions and celebrations, with features like a private garden, period furnishings, and historical details. The host, who identified himself as Robert, had excellent reviews from previous guests who praised the property's beauty, cleanliness, and historical authenticity. Robert had been responsive and professional during David and Lisa's booking process, providing detailed information about the house's history and amenities, and expressing enthusiasm for hosting a couple who would appreciate the property's unique character. David and Lisa's arrival at the house exceeded their expectations, with Robert providing a personal tour that highlighted the property's historical features and period furnishings. The house was beautifully maintained and decorated with authentic period details and modern conveniences that created the perfect combination of historical charm and contemporary comfort. For the first night of their stay, David and Lisa's experience at the house was everything they had hoped for, with the romantic atmosphere and beautiful surroundings providing the perfect setting for their anniversary celebration. The couple enjoyed exploring the house's historical features and period rooms, and they appreciated the attention to detail and authenticity. But on the second night of their stay, David and Lisa began to experience disturbing phenomena that challenged their understanding of what they had assumed was simply a beautifully restored historical property. The couple was awakened by sounds coming from other parts of the house, including footsteps, voices, and what appeared to be the movement of furniture and other objects in rooms that should have been empty during their stay. Ring that notification bell if you've ever stayed in a historic Airbnb where you heard footsteps in empty rooms. Because what David and Lisa discovered about their romantic getaway proved that some historic properties come with residents who never checked out and don't appreciate living guests sharing their eternal home. David's investigation of the sounds revealed that they were coming from areas of the house that were supposed to be private guest areas. But when he checked these rooms, he found them empty and undisturbed, with no explanation for the sounds that had awakened them. The sounds would resume whenever David and Lisa returned to their bedroom, creating a pattern of activity that seemed to be deliberately timed to disturb their sleep. The disturbing phenomena escalated when David and Lisa began to see figures moving through the house during the night, shadowy forms that would appear in doorways and corridors, but would disappear when the couple tried to investigate or make direct contact. The figures appeared to be people in period clothing who moved through the house as if they were familiar with its layout and were going about normal daily activities. Lisa's research into the house's history revealed that the property had been the site of multiple deaths over the years, including family members who had died of disease accidents and other causes during the 19th and early 20th centuries when the house had been a private family residence. The historical records suggested that the house had a reputation for supernatural activity and that previous owners and guests had reported similar experiences. David and Lisa realized that their romantic anniversary getaway had become a supernatural encounter that was far beyond anything they had expected or prepared for when they booked what they thought was simply a beautifully restored historical property. The couple's attempts to contact Robert for assistance or explanation were unsuccessful, as the host was not responding to their messages. The situation became more frightening when the supernatural activity began to focus specifically on David and Lisa, with the ghostly figures appearing to be aware of their presence and attempting to communicate or interact with them in ways that suggested the spirits were not simply residual hauntings, but were conscious entities with intentions and purposes that involved the living guests. David and Lisa's attempts to leave the house early were complicated by their emotional investment in their anniversary celebration and their reluctance to abandon what was supposed to be a special romantic weekend. But as the supernatural activity intensified and became more personal and threatening, the couple realized that their safety and well-being were more important than their vacation plans. David and Lisa checked out of the house early and found alternative accommodations for the remainder of their anniversary weekend. But their experience at the historic property had fundamentally changed their understanding of vacation rentals and the potential risks of staying in properties with unknown histories and supernatural reputations. The investigation that followed David and Lisa's report revealed that Robert was aware of the house's supernatural activity and had been deliberately concealing this information from guests to maintain bookings and positive reviews. The investigation also revealed that several other guests had reported similar supernatural experiences, but that their complaints had been dismissed or ignored by both the host and the Airbnb platform. David and Lisa's experience taught them that historic vacation rental properties could expose guests to supernatural phenomena that were not disclosed by hosts or rental platforms, and that the atmospheric charm and historical significance that made such properties attractive could also make them unsuitable for guests who were not prepared for paranormal encounters. These three accounts from Airbnb guests across America reveal a disturbing truth about vacation rental accommodations. The homes and apartments we trust for temporary lodging can harbor secrets that turn dream vacations into nightmares and expose us to dangers that traditional hotels and accommodations could never allow. Michael's encounter with sophisticated cybercriminals in Portland proved that some hosts view business travelers as sources of valuable information to steal rather than guests to accommodate. Jennifer's experience with an obsessive and intrusive host in Vermont demonstrated that remote properties can expose guests to hosts with serious mental health issues who view isolated visitors as captive audiences for their need to control and monitor other people's lives. David and Lisa's supernatural encounter in Savannah revealed that historic properties can come with undisclosed paranormal activity that transforms romantic getaways into terrifying encounters with entities who never left their former homes. The most chilling aspect of these accounts isn't just the individual violations and dangers themselves, it's the realization that these risks are inherent in the Airbnb model, where strangers open their homes to travelers without the professional oversight, security protocols, and accountability standards that govern traditional hospitality businesses. Michael had no warning that his highly rated, professionally presented apartment would expose him to a sophisticated criminal network that specialized in targeting business travelers and stealing their valuable information under the cover of providing legitimate accommodations. Jennifer had no indication that her peaceful writing retreat would become a nightmare of surveillance and control by a host whose mental instability and obsessive behavior made escape from the remote property both necessary and dangerous. David and Lisa had no clue that their romantic anniversary celebration would become a supernatural encounter with entities who viewed their presence as an intrusion into a property where the dead had never really departed. If you're currently using Airbnb or considering vacation rental accommodations, if you've ever felt uncomfortable about host behavior or discovered evidence that your privacy had been compromised, or if you've experienced unexplained phenomena during stays in historic or remote properties, trust your instincts and remember that the unique experiences and cost savings of vacation rentals might not be worth the risks you'll face. Share this video with anyone who uses vacation rental platforms, because understanding these risks and warning signs could be the difference between a memorable vacation and a traumatic experience that changes how you think about travel and accommodation safety. The next time you're booking vacation accommodations, remember these stories and ask yourself whether the money you save and the unique experiences you gain from staying in private homes are worth placing your safety, privacy, and peace of mind in the hands of strangers whose only qualification is owning property and creating an attractive online listing. Before you go, check out the playlist in the description for more true vacation rental horror stories that could change how you travel. Because in the end, the most important part of any vacation is returning home safely with your privacy intact and your personal information secure. And no amount of money saved or unique experience gained is worth risking your safety in the hands of people whose intentions and mental stability are completely unknown to you. Comment below if these stories have made you reconsider your vacation rental choices. And remember that sometimes the most dangerous part of traveling isn't getting to your destination. It's what happens after you arrive and discover that the people you're trusting with your safety and security have intentions that go far beyond providing comfortable accommodations for paying guests. Stay safe out there, and remember that traditional accommodations with professional staff, established security protocols, and corporate accountability might cost more, but they provide protections and oversight that private homes simply cannot offer, no matter how good their reviews or how professional their hosts appear to be.